February 26, 1945. A single shell is loaded into a 16-inch gun at the U.S. Naval Proving Ground in Dahlgren, Virginia. Its target, a plate of steel, a solid, impregnable mass of steel so thick it was believed to be impenetrable. What happened in the next 3 seconds would render 30 years of battleship design obsolete, end the arms race between empires, and quietly rewrite the rules of warfare at sea. This is the story of a single test shot, a single shot at a remote test site that changed everything. To understand why this moment matters, we need to go back to the early 20th century, a time when battleships were the ultimate symbol of national power. These floating fortresses were equipped with numerous massive cannons and carried armor thick enough to ignore enemy fire. The logic is simple: build bigger guns, wear heavier armor. Whoever has the most firepower and the thickest steel will win. By the 1930s, this arms race had reached its peak. The naval powers were pouring all their industrial resources into this game. Japan, preparing for war in the Pacific, laid down the keels for the Yamato-class battleships, the largest, most heavily armored warships ever built. Yamato's main belt armor was over 16 inches thick, supported by multiple layers of steel lining behind it, designed to absorb and deflect incoming projectiles. Japanese engineers believed they had created an unsinkable fortress. America, watching from across the Pacific, began to face a serious problem. American battleships like the Iowa-class carried 16-inch guns, the same caliber as the Yamato. They were America's answer to Japan's floating fortresses. But there was one important difference. American shells could not reliably penetrate Japan's new super armor. In a head-on confrontation, the American battleships would probably lose, and losing at sea meant losing the war. Now, you might think the solution is obvious. Just build bigger guns. That's the traditional way of thinking. That, after all, is how the arms race has always worked. But there is a serious problem with this solution. Designing and building larger battleships would take years. Years America did not have. The war was raging. Ships were being sunk. And that means every day that passes, people are dying. The time pressure is unimaginable. So, American engineers asked another question. What if instead of building a bigger hammer, we built a smarter hammer? This is where the Mark 8 armor-piercing projectile, or APC for short, comes in. On the surface, it doesn't look revolutionary. It was still a 16-inch shell. The size was exactly the same as those in use in the fleet. But inside that steel shell was something entirely new, a breakthrough in metallurgy and engineering that would change the game forever. Traditional armor-piercing rounds have one fatal flaw. When they hit hardened armor, steel that's been heat-treated to be extremely hard on the outside, the bullet's nose shatters on impact. The armor would win. Japanese engineers knew this. They designed their armor specifically to exploit this weakness. But the Mark 8 APC was different. Its designers used a soft steel nose at the tip of the bullet. Upon impact with armor, this nose piece deforms and absorbs the initial impact force, allowing the hard penetrator core below to penetrate without breaking. Behind that, the bullet body is forged from a new alloy, stronger, more resilient, engineered at the molecular level to withstand forces previous designs couldn't. This solution is elegant, it's incredibly accurate, and it's never been tested in practice. Which brings us back to February 26, 1945. At the test site in Dahlgren, Virginia, the day of reckoning had come. A group of engineers, metallurgists, and naval officers gathered around a giant test stand, waiting with bated breath. Before them was the target, a section of armor designed to mimic the defensive belt of a Japanese battleship. 16 inches of reinforced steel, multiple layers, slanted. The same armor that protected Yamato. The risk was too great. If the Mark 8 APC failed, the Navy would have to go back to square one, back to the blueprints. Months, even years would be wasted. American sailors would face Japanese battleships with weapons that were not a deterrent. The balance of power in the Pacific hangs in the balance. The cannon is loaded, the engineering team stands back. The final command was given. The entire test site held its breath. Fire! The 16-inch gun roared. The shell whistled past at over 2,000 feet a second. It slammed into the armor plate with the force of a freight train, and then all was quiet. As the echoes died down, the engineers charged forward, running towards the smoking target. Smoke filled the air. The target armor plate stood at an angle, scorched and scarred, and there, pierced right through the center, was a hole, not a crack, not a dent, a clean hole. The Mark 8 APC shell did the impossible. It defeated Yamato-class armor. In that moment, everything changed. For 30 years, naval strategy was dominated by a simple equation. Thicker armor plus bigger guns equaled victory. Nations have poured billions of dollars into building floating fortresses, each trying to outdo the last. The Yamato was the pinnacle of that philosophy. A ship so massive, so heavily armored, it was believed to be invincible. But the Mark 8 APC proved that brute force could be overcome by precision. You didn't need a bigger gun. You just need a smarter bullet. A weapon that is cleverly designed to overcome the problem. Japan never knew this. By the time the Mark 8 APC was deployed to the fleet, the Yamato had been destroyed, not by American battleships, but by aircraft carriers and dive bombers. The age of battleships was over, and ironically, weapons designed to win battleship duels appeared just as such duels were becoming obsolete. The lesson remained. The Mark 8 APC signaled a shift from brute force to precision, shaping future weapons, from guided missiles to smart bombs. And it's worth pausing to think about the people behind this groundbreaking moment. Engineers and scientists spent years in the lab, testing alloys, calculating trajectories, running simulation after simulation. They weren't generals. They were not admirals either. Most of their names have been forgotten by history, even though their work was incredibly important. But they understood one thing deeply, that wars are not decided only on the battlefield. They are decided in workshops and testing grounds, in quiet moments when someone asks, what if we try something different? The Mark 8 APC was not born out of fanfare or based solely on old traditions. It is born of humility, the humility to admit that old ways no longer work, and the courage to try something completely new. So what happened after that test shot? The Mark 8 APC was immediately rushed into mass production. It was quickly loaded onto American battleships throughout the Pacific theater. And though it never faced the Yamato in battle, the Yamato was sunk by aircraft in April 1945. The existence of this shell changed the calculus of naval warfare. It demonstrated that armor, no matter how thick, was no longer invincible. It hastened the end of the battleship era. Why build huge, expensive warships when a well-designed shell can defeat them? More broadly, it marked the beginning of a new era in military technology, one where precision, science, and engineering were more important than raw power. The same principles that guided the Mark 8 APC would later guide the development of laser-guided weapons, stealth technology, and modern missile systems. Just one test shot, just 3 seconds. It was the end of a great era. History is full of moments like this, quiet turning points that don't announce themselves with fanfare, but change the course of everything that follows. The Dahlgren experiment was not a battle. There were no heroes, no enemies to be defeated. There was only one bullet, one target, and one question: could we do better? The answer was yes. And the world with that answer moved forward.